Greetings, everyone. It is I, Titus Narvan Dracovin, your Lord and Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and of course, welcome. Today we're diving once again into the Sixth World and taking yet another tour. I've put on my tour guide hat, I've gotten my flags to keep pointing to you to various things that are going on, and I'm taking you down to Africa. Yes. Or to Africa, down from, south, from where I'm at in North America. It's just sayings, don't mind them. But anyway, yes, we're going to be talking about Africa today, and I'm going to preface this with some things that I was talking about before we got started on the video here, with just Twitch. There isn't a lot of information here. I did my best to, Down to Bless the Rains, the song. That's where I get it from, down in Africa. Thank you. But we know of most of the countries in Africa as of 2072. And remember, 6th edition takes place 2075, so it's only 3 years after. So the map that we have of 2072 is fairly accurate, which is great. We also know there are still some issues with various territories and messing around. The biggest problems lie in that only certain countries and places do we know what's going on. There's even entire nations that we have the names of that we know nothing about what's going on in there. A big example which takes up a large portion of Central Africa is the Congo tribal lands. We know they exist. We know they're sort of yet not a nation. And then the issue is that, we don't know what's going on there. I'll show you on the map. There are some, gray areas where the nations are a lot less stable. And it's just unfortunate that even in these unstable areas, where their territories are kind of driven out, we don't know a lot. But there are some solid nations, and there's some things to talk about. And what I will be diving into is 3 major cities that are in Africa, because they give the best example of what is going on in Shadowrun 6th World Africa. Cape Town, Lagos, and Sekondi. Sekondi is less amount of information, but it's a free city, and we can go over it a little bit. And some of these nations, like where Cape Town is, in the nation that was formerly South Africa, we can dive into a few of their other smaller cities and talk about them a little bit. So we can look at that region there. So, we have a little bit of Western Africa, we have a little bit of Southern Africa, we have a little bit of Northern Africa, but there's a large portion of it that is just missing information. And let's talk about first, of course, a couple of books that you can check out that might help you. These are ones here that I would recommend out of all of them. First off is that one, Feral Cities. Why Feral Cities? It goes over Lagos. This is where we detail a lot of Lagos. There is an adventure in 4th edition which takes place in Lagos too. I recommend checking it out. I've always talked about using that one because it's a series of actually pre-made adventures that I was thinking of running for 5th edition version of it. But Feral Cities, that's a great place to look at some of these places like this and go over it. Another one that you might want to check out is, of course, the 6th World Almanac. It provides some information. The main thing that the 6th World Almanac gives us is the world map. The 6th World Almanac provides us with a lot of what's going on in the world, a lot of map-based information. There's information in the book Cyber Pirates on the Ivory and Gold Coast, Magic the Shadows, the core 5th edition core rulebook talks a little bit about it, Raw Survival Guide, and State of the Art 2063 all mention stuff about Africa. But a lot of them don't really go into the details that we might want, unfortunately. There are just a lot of details that are just missing. And best you can do to figure out that stuff. But we'll do our best to talk about these things. And I might, reference a little bit of these books, but I'm using a lot of, as I did with the North America, the Shadowrun Wikipedia, because we're not diving as in depth as, some other material. Could be. We're going a little bit in depth. We're not going heavy. I don't actually need these headphones on. Sorry. Noting it's like Cyber Pirates is a second edition book. And, over than that, I think Six World Almanac is 4th or 5th edition off the top of my head. I would have to remember. But just as notes, I'm not showing off those pictures, but, notes about them. Alright, so. We want to move over here. And we're going to go over to this image here, because it's a little bigger. But this is Africa. Yes. Welcome to Africa. Again, we do have a little bit of information. Just noting here, a little bit of information on the Ivory Coast. The problem is it's based more upon, from the Pirates book, what's going on there in the pirating thing and stuff like that. Anyway. And it's from 2nd edition, so it is unfortunately... It'll give you an idea, but if you really want information, Smugglers of the Golden Ivory Coast is in that Cyber Pirates book. It's not very up-to-date. 2nd edition, it's the 2050s, 2060s, I guess you can technically consider it. A little later, but has some information. 5th edition from 2070, 6th edition. But, so, I do have that book, so we might try to talk about the Golden Ivory Coast tribal lands a little bit before we finish up for today. Anyway, we should get started. So, where to start? That's a good question here. I'm going to try to go as alphabetical as I can when looking through here. And I'm using 2 different sources of the Wikipedia, the countries of Africa and Africa, because the countries of Africa mentions older countries that don't exist anymore. So, Algeria, Angola, we both have a little bit of information on them. Algeria has the capital of Algiers. That's about it. Unfortunately, actual wiki information doesn't exist other than that. Angola, we know a little bit more. We know that it is a communist republic in Angola. So that's something to say about that. That we know that Angola, over on the southwestern, I forget this image myself. Other down in that kind of above Anzia, we know what kind of nation it is. We know they use the currency of Nuyen. Again, we know they're communists. We know that for communist states, there is a lot... Yeah, it's a political mess. You were right. For communist states, it's actually in pretty good condition as of some of the books that mentioned it. In Runner's Haven... the border clash with Anzia, and the De Beers Omnitech corporate military in 2070, because Angola was usurping contested diamond fields in the former territory of Namibia the year before. So Angola was trying to go for some diamond fields in what was Namibia in Anzani, and then there was a border clash between Anzani and Angola. That's all we really know about that, which is kind of an unfortunate thing of we know this little bit here. Great. And we know that, we'll talk about Anzani in a second here. So, we know a little bit about Angola. It's communist, and they are not in a bad position. The nation of, if I can see it on the map here, Anye, which is on the eastern coast near Liberia and the Azanti Nation. We know nothing about that. Anye, we know it exists. That's the thing about that one. And even like, you know, when we're looking at that map, Algeria in the north, with Algiers, we know it exists. Asmondo, which is a bit north of Anye. We do have some basic information for this one, and I can actually provide something here, which is really neat. We can show off. I have its flag. This is the only African flag, which will do... That one is a little bigger, the top of it. This is the only African flag I could find of the Shadowrun African flags. So that is a nation that I have the flag for. I'll switch back to this. I'm going to have this up for the entire time, pretty much. Just because it's... unfortunately provides a lot more information. So Asmondo is a ghoul nation in Western Africa. It's in what used to be northern Ghana. It's a highly awakened, friendly nation that's populated by spirit shapeshifters, metasapiens, HMHVV infected metahumans. Its capital is Nyamkopon. Founder is Thema Lula, heir and current ruler, Queen Rani Lolua. So, like, thing is, I can talk a little bit about this nation. And it's just an unfortunate thing, I feel like, whereas in the North America, I could go into depth about some of these nations a lot more. I think maybe this is the one of the nations that I feel like I might be able to do its own video on. Because it is one that is very unique as a nation of Awaken. It's got Orihalcum. It was founded in 2030, and, you know, it was in a region, a lot of Africa was devastated by the Vitas. So the plague that was going on, we know Africa was devastated by that, unfortunately. You know, that's an information that we can say because of knowledge of Asmondo. So... Anyway, I think the idea of, we'll give a little bit of information here. It is one of the highest literacies in the world, with 90% of its population able to read and 60% having college degrees. It's ironic because a lot of ghouls are blind and incapable of seeing, but they have SimSense technology that allows them to help that, you know? And the majority of its population are Sasa Bonsam, which are an African ghoul metavariant. Again, I can do more research on this area. There's more things to talk about. There are a lot of books which talk about this one. The Sixth World Almanac actually details this one and a lot of other things. And I think I can give this country its own thing. We have its flag. We know information about it, but now you know there's a ghoul nation there, and we have it on the map. Now, the Asante Nation, which is south of Asmondo, we do know a little bit about. It's a monarchy with King Osai. I'm going to butcher a lot of these names, so I apologize here. Agyemon Mung has about 1 million people. Capital is Accra. They have their own dollar, and the Nuyen is also accepted. Their languages are Twi Fanti. In 2025, the Asante Nation was the only Western African nation to with the domestic stability to respond and apply for recognition as a country to the United States Global Economic Task Force. And in 2026, the United Nations recognized them, and it opens border trades. And 2038, it goes online, developing matrix infrastructure. So the Asante Nation is another interesting one. We don't actually have a huge amount of information on it. I'm going to say that. The information I have is pretty limited what I'm talking about here, unlike the last one. We know that it doesn't have shifting borders, unlike a lot of them. It's got a hereditary monarchy. A lot of laws that are described as draconian, where minor crimes can be punished by beatings, maiming, or death. We know a little bit about Accra. It's got light industry, sugar, coffee, cocoa, steel, aluminum, gold, plastics. It's one of the few places in Africa where the matrix is active and stable. It doesn't have a lot of corporate institutes because government has a very hardline stance against them. but there is some corporate presence there. Pueblo, Biotechnologies, De Beers, and Omnitech, Illuminations of the New Dawn, have some presence there. And we don't know a lot about Accra, too. It's mentioned. But it's the capital, along with other major cities which we know nothing about. Kofuri Dua, Kumsami, Mampong, Obusi, and Tema. Sorry if I mispronounce any of these names. I'm not looking up all the names to see how to pronounce them, and I am not a native speaker, so apologies right there. Anyway, the other nation that we do have some information on is, of course, the southern tip of Africa, when we're talking about the A's, because there's a lot of them, the Azania. It is a confederation of states of the southern tip of Africa. The Republic of South Africa is the principal predecessor of it, though more states have joined with it. Its capital is the Pretoria, Witwatersrand, and Vaal Metroplex. It's a federation with 43 million individuals, a lot of major languages, uses the Nubian. We have an ethnic makeup. We do. Based on and we have an idea of their religious beliefs too, and some stuff like that, some vital statistics. So if you want to look those up. Basically, in 2039, a treaty foundation founded the country after a long civil war, and in 2040 it was formally recognized. It still has ethnic strife between, unfortunately, blacks and whites. It's the South Africa. Apartheid, we're ways away from it, but still some of that stuff happens. Racism against metahumans is aggravated by latent racial tensions between the African tribes and Anglo-Saxon people. There's Boers and humanist polyclubs there. There's the native Wakambi, which are elves descended from the Zulu nation, which basically reject anybody that isn't native or elven. And there are about 11 languages spoken there. There are major official languages and a couple other languages that are spoken. The languages are Afrikaans, English, Ndebele, Northern Sotho, Swazi, Songa, Swana, Venda, Xhosa, Zulu, and the other ones are San, the Bushman dialects, Portuguese, German, Telugu, and Gujarati. Those last ones are the non-official but spoken there. It's semi-arid, subtropical on the coast, sunny days, cool nights, and we have major towns with Cape Town. We know that the Pretoria with Vaal Metroplex is the capital of Azani, because it includes Pretoria, Johannesburg, and Vereeniging, or Vereeniging. And we know that it's run by Metropool, a subsidiary of Lone Star. That's all we know about that city, unfortunately. Other cities that we don't know a lot about but exist and are places that are there, what we can talk about before we get to Cape Town is there's New Hilobane, which is the Zulu capital of Azania. And they're more tolerant of the 4 elven enclaves. It does have intolerance for non-Zulu elves. Zulu elves consider half the city. 20% of the population is non-meta-human sapiens, including many shapeshifters, large free spirit population. Noted for its infrastructure, an extensive AR overlay and bullet trait to Durban. So New Hilobane, which is in the Zulu nation, which is a minor nation within Azani, which it is the nation of course, the Wakambi, the elves of the Zulu nation. It's a haven for them and many extended species. It's reclusive. It's kind of keeps to itself. There are aggressions from them, but usually they're kind of kept in check. They're underdeveloped a lot. The Zulu nation is basically a group that have stayed with hunter-gatherer tribal groups and protective of their lands within Azani. They're a group of people that lived in that area that wish to live like their ancestors did. And they do have some meta variants between them that have their own things, but they also have some infrastructure. There's corporate tries to get presence there. It doesn't always work there. Anyway, Johannesburg, of course, is part of the Pretoria there, but Cape Town is the other big town that we can talk about. We know a bunch about Cape Town. Not like a full thing, but we have enough of a breakdown that you could play something in Cape Town. It's mentioned in Cyber Pirates, Feral Cities, Ghost Cartels, Gunhaven, Parabotany. Runner's Haven has a big chunk of information on it. I'd recommend that one probably. Six World Almanac does also have some information in it, and Sprawl Survival Guide has a couple of pages where they mention it. We know basic layout of the city. We know the Table Mountains are there, Lower House. We know some of the important information there, like Universal Omnitech, De Beers Omnitech is the big corporate presence. The Rain Queen, the Great Dragon Mujaji, the Rain Queen, is on Table Mount, close to Cape Town, and she kind of does her thing. There's some crime bosses we know about, and some street style that we do know about, too, that you can also look into. So effectively, I can talk about the city of Cape Town, but we know a bit basics that give you an idea of what it means to live in this region. And I think that's the best thing about Cape Town here, is if you wanted to look into it, it would give you an idea, at least, what it's like to live in Azani. At least in one of the cities. Other regions, it varies. It's kind of like you have ways of living around a city and ways of not living around a city, Works the same in any nation. I'm going to mute myself to blow my nose here, though. Anyway, but that's Azani. As much as, I would say, we can dive deep into this information about it, we can't really. We only have so much information about it. Other places that we unfortunately don't have a lot of information about is Benin, which you can see, and Banatum, which are both around the Azanti Nation over on the west side. But when it comes to the bees, we do know a little bit about the Balu Empire, so we can talk about that a little bit. We know it's a monarchy under the leader of King Giesele. I can't mention in the Cyber Pirates book. The Cyber Pirates book might be a great place to look up some of this thing. The capital is Yamoussoukro. Anyway. So, what do we know about this? Well, I can tell you, it involves the Ivory Coast also. King Gasalai declared he would recapture the Ivory Coast for the Bao Empire, and after some victories, his people, following his megalomaniac visionary enthusiastically, he fights to achieve a direct corridor to the coast sea for his empire, but his small ethnic nation of pirates blocked the way. Most of his forces waged war against the Aini lands, which is the Andia lands. I have information on them. Remember I said we didn't have a lot about them? It mentions it here. They're a nation comprised of orcs and trolls and the old Anye tribe. And of Balui that goblinized since 2022. So basically, the goblinized members of his nation went there. He made great use of helmet humans, elf, and dwarf mercenaries, paying in ivory and body parts of natural critters. While non-Bao is in the occupied territories are only second-class citizens, he doesn't make them slaves. He keeps their homes, and he is not known to order mass executions or torture. On the other hand, units were using large amounts of napalm and herbicides to destroy enemy territories. In 2063, the Bao Empire is not only recognized as a country by the United Nations, but also achieved a non-permanent seat on the Security Council of the United Nations. So there you go. Cytocrup has presence. Aztecs has some presence there. It's a tropical region, mostly flat. Again, hey, look. This is like the information we know about it. I missed that the Anyi lands is mentioned here. Now we know about the Anyi lands when I had very little about it. Okay, so I found out some more information about the Anyi lands. There's a link to it that's a different link, because the Anyi lands is different than Anyi, but they are the same thing. Okay, so the Anyi lands is a troll supremacist state that's unrecognized in coastal Western Africa. Gotcha. With King Koame in a monarchy where it's 20% trolls, 80% orcs. It's formed in 2023. It's in the former Ivory Coast, holds much of the southeast, but lacks the coastline. Okay, so the king declared that orcs were the chosen, and orcs were lesser beings made in their image. Elves, humans, and dwarves are expelled as not real. And they've had their war of aggression against the Bolu Empire, basically against them. They're also warring against the Nizma in the south, trying to gain access to the coastline. It's basically ethnic wars in the areas of Ghana and Ivory Coast, and it's brutal, and massacres are commonplace. Yeah, trolls are leaders. Orcs are almost like virtually slaves in the nation of the Anyi Land. So it's technically not a nice place, you know. As much as we'd like to say the Bali Empire is not great, neither is the Anyi Nation. They're kind of both terrible, I've got to admit, you know, because they're very political mess, ethnic cleansey, murder each other. It's just, yeah. Anyway, so there's Egypt, the Ethiopian territories we can talk about, and yeah. Let's talk about Egypt a little bit, because we do know a little bit about Egypt. Current Egypt, as you can see it on the map, includes more areas. It includes the former nation of Sudan and former Libya. It's still a moderately Islamic nation, but has problems, tribal politics of the Bedouins. It's a merc market for participating in the desert wars. It has a growing technological population since the Patriarchs of Coptics welcomed technomancers in December of 2070. It's still a major tourist hotspot. And has some actual problems because of the new Islamic Jihad. Let's talk about these. Still has a lot of historical archaeological sites and has participated in the Soccer World Cup in the Amazonia 2064. Seder Cup is the major corporate presence, and it's an Islamic democracy. Current president is Baruti El-Gabari, and prime minister is Hanif Zaidi, as of 2072. Okay, let's mention Desert Wars, because it's a thing. It's the largest sport in the world. It takes place in the Sahara Desert. It is in the blasted-out ruins of what used to be Libya, a result of a 10-minute war. So basically, it was basically a brief chemical nuclear exchange between Libya and Israel that led hundreds of thousands dead. In 2004, yeah. And it's televised skirmishes between corporate security forces and host mercenary companies. The championship match is lethal with live orbits, combat matches, killer matrix programs, and uses. Matches leading to championship are non-lethal with a mix of dummy rounds, laser IT dive systems locked on exoskeletons, non-lethal matrix programs, and stun magic in use. Deaths can still occur from accidents. So basically, it's a big tournament where it's, you know, non-lethal stuff up until the, you know, head thing where, you know, if you're in the championships, it's to the death. There are other Desert War franchises operating in the Gobi Desert in the Asian continent, Mojave in the southwest of former United States. It's a sport. It's combat sport. It's fake war sport. And, you know, it's very popular in Egypt. Okay, the new Islamic Jihad is a terror organization that is, you know, a thing to deal with. That has come into being in 2060s. So, hey, you know, there's always extremists everywhere. We've talked about them in other versions, but still exists with it, the Egypt, Middle East area, too. So that's a thing to probably talk about. And we don't really know a lot about Cairo right now. I'd have to figure that out somehow. But that's Egypt in a nutshell. In the African Nations Update in the Feral Cities, they do talk about this a little bit. Sprawl Survival Guide mentions it a little bit, but there is a lot of like little books that talk about things related to Egypt and stuff here and there too. So you certainly could find out more about it. Okay, let's talk about the Ethno-Malian territories a little bit here, because it's a nation that's made up Ethiopia, Somalia, and Eritrea. After Africa was ravaged by Vetus in 2010s, 2020s, Ethiopian priests of Addis Ababa were effective at halting the outbreak. The Ethiopian territories have advanced medical technology. Cybernetics are extremely common among the population, as there are taboos about flesh since the Vetus outbreak, as well as gas masks are in common fashion statement. The territories are ruled by secretive priest kings. There are rumors that a Delta cyber clinic run by Zion amalgamated in Libella. Provisional capital is Mogadishu. And Addis Ababa is, of course, another city. And again, that's all we know about the Ethiopian territories. It paints an interesting picture because it's a place, because they figured out a way to deal with the plague pretty effectively, that they got advanced medical technology. As much as you'd think like, oh, it's Africa. No. You know, it's similar to you never know in the last 70 years of development how these nations have developed since things have happened. Like, we have to look at how things were 20 years before us almost, and then zap ahead from that date with a lot of shit happening and driving development. So the Ethio-Malian territories, there's a little bit of information on them. We can talk a little bit about them, but again, there isn't, unfortunately, a lot. We can mention the free city of Sekondi, because it is a thing to mention. And it's another major African city. Its capital, Sekondi. It's a corporate oligarchy. So, in 2023, Sekondi became a free city under corporate control. That's really what we know about it. That's it. Cyber Pirates is, again, the book that talks about that. And, you know, I would recommend... Cyber Pirates is a great book for a bunch of information on this. It provides a lot of information on Africa. I mean, it provides information on the Caribbean, the Philippines, stuff like that. It not only does it talk about piracy in the Shadowrun age, because guess what? The world is a chaotic mess. You know, people like pirates can certainly find their place a lot more than they used to. And, you know, that's why it's a good book to check out to find a lot of information on what's going on. At least a couple decades before Shadowrun 6th edition there. But yeah. We can also talk about Kenya. Kenya exists, as you can see. So Kenya is in East Africa. It borders the Ethno-Malian territories, Congo tribal lands, the Hadani tribal lands. Its capital is Nairobi. It's a democracy, 53 million people, uses the Nuyen. Its port town of Mombasa is still a notable port and trading center that still exists in a lot of power today. The Awakening was a turning point for the country, though. The shifting weather patterns allowed the fertile Western Plateau to have a relief because it was kind of having trouble there. The environmental geological change seen elsewhere in Africa had little effect on the nation's agricultural areas, though the Abra-Norian areas became even a bit drier. The fetus epidemics, a significant portion of the population was affected. However, because of its importance on shipping trading routes, along with corporate investment, a lot of populations started to receive measures to fight the disease, you know. As, unfortunately, we saw in a lot of Africa and places that were, you know, as much as the Vitis did kill a lot of people around the world, places that there was medications and medical things, there was less deaths. It didn't stop them all, but there was less. During this time, though, tribal magicians found that traditional magic suddenly worked. So, Kenya came out of the Awakening and the Vitis epidemic in better condition than a lot of its neighbors. It's got corporate court blessing. It annexed the ungoverned areas of Mount Kilimanjaro, bringing stable industry to area development covered mass driver. And in 2068, Richard Wangai was elected president of Kenya. Its elections are held every 6 years. Well, the thing is, think about this. Magic came back. So their tribal medication, which, you know, was doing its thing, but all of a sudden, I'm a shaman, I actually have magic now. You know, my stuff, which was traditionally passed down through generations, I'm connected to those powers now. That's the kind of thing there. Elections are held every 6 years. It has an elected National Assembly of 246 members. There is a stable state, but it has tribal disputes, especially around Mount Kilimanjaro, frequently. It's divided into following districts: Central, Coast, Eastern, Nairobi, Northern, Eastern, Lanzia, Rift Valley, Western, and Mount Kilimanjaro. Kilimanjaro was just a special administrative district. Has natural resources and a lot of industry, a major seaport, tourism, a lot of agriculture. The Kenya Highlands are the most successful agricultural region in Africa as of the 2070s. So that's a big thing about that. Kenya's in great shape. They maintain close relations with the UN. They provide 1/5 of the UN peacekeeping troops. Oh. Yeah. I guess it depends on what tribes you're talking about, but I'm sure some of that stuff actually still exists, especially because, yeah, they gained magical powers. I mean, like, that happened in a lot of places. Shamanic magics are a big part of it, and there are versions of it from a lot of places in the world. You know. But that's a very interesting thing, that effectively the UN as it exists now, 1/5 of their troops are from Kenya. It has incorporated corporate partnerships and investments. So Nairobi, Mombasa, and Mount Kilimanjaro are cities and locations. I can talk about Nairobi a little bit. It's nicknamed the Gateway to Space. I don't know why it's nicknamed the Gateway to Space, but apparently... Oh, because it's near the mass driver. Okay. It has a mass driver there. I forget what the hell a mass driver is. Isn't that the like a thing that shoots stuff into space? Okay, later. I'm like mentioning mass driver. What is a mass driver? Sorry. Oh yeah, it launches stuff into space. So they have a goddamn mass driver. That's why it's the Gateway to Space. Okay. It's known for its numerous space technology corps, manufacturing products, goods for transportation to space, tourist hub for space-based personnel on an Earth vacation, or those headed to space for one of the off-planet resorts. Because there's space stuff, you know. We can probably talk about that one day, but there's space stuff. It's a temperate climate, giving it a green field, Nairobi. So it's a pretty nice place to check out, Nairobi. Mombasa. So it's like, it's, you know, if you go to Kenya, it's a very developed nation. It's a very developed nation. We can talk about Liberia, which is where on this map I see it over there. near the Golden Ivory Coast tribal lands. We don't know about a lot about Liberia other than it's its own nation. Gotta be honest. It's mentioned. It's mentioned. So, I'm almost out of places to talk about. I have some other things I can mention, but really stuff to talk about. I can point out on this map, like the Golden Ivory Coast tribal lands, as I talked about. You can go through the Cyber Pirates book from 2nd edition, and that'll do a good job giving you some information on the region and stuff. Asmanto, Balo, Empire, Anya, Namaswane, Asante Nations. A lot of places there that are going around. The various resource rushes and stuff like that. Vetus's effects on the region. The Awakening's effects on the region. Goblinization. The various nations we've already talked about. The magic of the region. And a lot of the borders in the region. Because there are a whole bunch of things that you can kind of go on in diving into it. Yeah. Anyway. So, let's mention some of the other nations that I have very little to no information on. Mali Faso, as you can see in the west. Mauryan Tanai. Don't know a lot about that, unfortunately. Nigeria. What we know about Nigeria is because we know about Lagos. I'm going to tell you that. We're going to talk about Lagos last. But what we know about Nigeria is because of Lagos. Oh, yeah. I didn't even mention the Congo DMZ and the Congo tribal lands. You know, those big things. This big area in the center. We don't know a lot about that and stuff there. Sekondi, which is near the Asante Nation, is another one we don't know a bunch about. And, of course, I think, isn't it? Oh, no, it's in the north. Tunisia. Tunis as its capital. We don't know a lot about that one, too. So these large swaths that we don't know a lot. Madagascar, we know their currency is the barter. We know that it's a stateless territory. It fared badly in the 2000s. Vetus hit it hard, killing about 1.5 million of the N Highlands' 14 million inhabitants. A lot of the survivors either fled off island or to the interior of the island. It's kind of gone unclaimed, a focal point in pirate gatherings. Jungle occupying the interior island regrew at an incredible rate after the Vitesse. Great form jungle spirits. Why it reformed, no one really knows. So basically, Madagascar doesn't have a government anymore. It collapsed. Its pirates are no people that didn't have a place to leave there are what's there. A barter system's preferred over an union because there's an official government. One gang is recognized as supreme over all others on the island. The Manajare, based in the city of the same name, located between Tamava and Fort Dalpin. They extort money from other gangs before another gang, a Zulu pirate gang called the Sanagama, killed many of them, including their leader. And so the Sanagama have been the rulers as of 2058 then. And they congregate on the east side of the island. And I mentioned some of those. Fort Dalpin, of course. A lot of the buildings are still there from before Vetus. They're just abandoned, a lot of, or not civilized. A lot of pirates congregate there. They have their own language, the pirates there. A hodgepodge of other languages, including English, Hindi, and French, along with others to New Timors. Tamava is 400 kilometers north of there, in its far worse shape. War between the pirates in the 2020s left it very unstable. Basically, looks like it's out of an apocalyptic movie. The outbreak of Delta anthrax in the late 2040s, caused by a stray frag grenade, blasting breach in a canister of the stuff, killed many of the city's inhabitants, kind of really devastating area. The worst pirates live in this place. Bioweapon traffickers, terrorists, and the like. Robberies common. It's advised bring some extra goods to throw to the wolves. The jungle's the core of the island, though. And yeah. A lot of rumors of what could be in the jungle. Secret megacorp facilities, dinosaurs, dragon hatching gowns. The immortal elf Harlequin was even said to be on the island at one point from a Shadowrun poster. So, yeah, it's another place you can talk about from Pirates Madagascar. It fared pretty badly. Morocco, the final nation that we're going to talk about before we talk a little bit about more and then finally hit on Lagos, is capital is Rabat. It's constitutional monarchy. The king staged a counter-coup against the fundamentalists that took over with the backing of the Spanish and the British and the Alliance for Allah invasion of Europe. I've looked into that history there. Probably dealing with Europe or other places there. There's smuggling, piracy, some corporate presence. Rabat and Tangier are the two places. Rabat's the capital. Tangier is a port city. We don't know a lot about Morocco either. Again, it's another place that I can point out and be like, hey, we know a little bit about it. And you could look up 1 billion books that mention it more than anything. So, yeah. We know about the central region of a big region of area, the Pan-African Federation, which isn't really a federation. It's really just a region. It's not really a federation. It's not a nation, not a region, area of regions and stuff. And, you know, we can point that out. And I think that's everything I can point out for the general nations of Africa. We went over our best about it. But we have one more place to talk about a little bit, and we're going to go into details a bit about Lagos. And I'm not going to dive deep into Lagos, because there's an entire book that talks about it. So, Lagos was once the capital of Nigeria. It was heavily hit by the Vitis epidemic in the 2010s, lost 3/4 of the population. Despite that, it still grew to the largest city in Nigeria with its proximity to the coast. Yeah. The awakening came as a relief to tribal shamans who were able to cure Vitex with traditional medicine. The Vites proper killed 10 to 12 million. The Vites 2 caused riots and 1/4 of the population dies due to the outbreak. Several sectors of the city are burned. The Night of Rage in 2039, the priests of Obatala offer shelter to metahumans and summon spirits to stop the riots. In 2043, the Universal Brotherhood attempts to open a chapter in the city, but due to rampant corruption, theft, and armed robbery, the branch is closed down, ironically probably saving the city. The Universal Brotherhood, of course, the people that did insect spirit stuff in Chicago. In 2061, ancestor spirits warn of the return of the dead following a prompt outbreak of Shedium, which is a body-snatching free spirit manifesting on the free realm, anchoring themselves to dead bodies. That's a thing. In 2063, the Niger Delta oil pipeline was completed and started the Seven King War for the control of the pipeline. In 2068, the Seven King War ends with Oni Agadoke making a deal with the Global Sandstorm for military support. Artifacts Unbound, Dawn of the Artifacts Dusk, Dawn of the Artifacts Midnight. Those books are the ones that I recommend checking out. Relates to Lagos, but we will stop by with heading over here. And actually, I should have opened up this book before. I should probably have opened up the Feral Cities to give you a little bit more on Lagos. Which, there it is. It's a 4th edition book. It's a pretty good one. I definitely recommend checking it out. Alright. Where are you in here? Lagos! I've actually read through the Lagos section. It's been a while. But, the fact is, I was originally going to do the Dawn of Artifacts game, so I did do a lot of research into there. There are a number of tribes and areas and the religions and stuff in Lagos. It's kind of swamped in. Part of the city is actually flooded, technically, because it was built on a swamp with rivers, creeks, and lagoons. So, with rising sea level and stuff like that, there are portions of the city that, like, you know, work on, sit in swampy sludge almost. They're kind of awful. A lot of pollutions in the city. A lot of not friendly nations. And if you would look up it does dive into Nigeria a little bit more and its various kingdoms and terrors. Like the Yoruba Kingdom, Edo Kingdom, and stuff like that. Igbodo Kingdom. And we do have some information on African politics that goes on in that area too. So, hey, it's a good section to talk about. And you can dive into Lagos a little bit more. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe as a, like, city, similar to Denver, we'll do Lagos in the future. So, video. That sounds like a good thing, because talking about Lagos will give you a little bit more on Africa. And honestly, in a very interesting city where a lot of adventures can be had, and there is actually adventures designed around it. So it's definitely something that I recommend if you want to look into it, to give you a little bit more about that. But we'll probably save that for the future. But, yeah. That's Africa. It's interesting to see that Africa has survived, and some areas of it have, in fact, thrived. And you can see that there are certain nations that have maintained pretty much a status quo equivalent to a lot of other places in the world. But think about Kenya, the Ethiopian territories with their advancements, Azani. I mentioned a lot of these places that have had advancements. But there are a lot of places that there are still battles and fights between each other. Honestly, it's chaos. Like, think about Madagascar. It's an island, but it's no longer a nation. It's an island of pirates. It's an unfortunate thing that, you know, Vitas, both outbreaks, did such a damage to the world. It is we who have lived through, or are living through, a plague. Think about it 10 times worse. Think about one of those diseases that kills so many people. Most of the people that are infected by it. And think about that getting loose in the world. That's Vitas. And it did such devastation. And you can see the effects in Africa still echoed in many of its places. A lot of the major nations that had some strength joined together. Those that had economic backing from other places managed to keep control. Smaller nations have done a good job of being independent on their own. But there are a lot of places that are just territories and are recognized as such and aren't really nations per se. A lot of Africa is just chaos that hasn't been able to repair itself because, again, there is a lot of old hostilities between many of the different ethnic groups within there, and there's nothing holding them back. And now there's more problems with, you know, we've got elves, dwarves, orcs, trolls, all kinds of metasapients and stuff like that, and awakened creatures and strange things, and magic that's come into existence, and new technologies, and all throwing this into a mess of, like, unchecked, bridled hostility against each other with major plagues which knock out majorities of your population, have just led to the chaos that is in great sections of Africa. It is a interesting thing to look at, how there is such great stability in certain regions and such instability in others. Things that, probably don't It's not to say that we don't have instability today in many places of the world, and Africa is a place that you can see some of that instability oftentimes, whether bloody or not. Here, it becomes bloody. And we've seen things like this happen when I talk about the history and a lot of the nations within North America, how there have been conflicts, bloody and armed, and they exist still, even in North America. It's just like the fact that this was an area that was less developed means that those problems were amplified to 11. And it was only certain nations which managed to honestly survive, to figure out ways to weather the storm of all things that happened in the early 21st century in the Sixth World, and have come out on top. Their neighbors are not so lucky. But it's a interesting nation area, a territory, nations to speak about. And honestly, I would love to see more of a lot of these nations. I'd love to know more about a lot of these places and what's going on there. And, it is a difficult thing probably with so many ethnicities and so many groups fighting with each other to talk about a lot of them. But it'd be cool. And certainly shattering whether you're from that area or coming in for some work, visiting Lagos, Kenya, Egypt, Tanzania, the Ethiopian territories, or even if you're going into the Congo lands to find something hidden in the jungles that some corporation needs you to find. Could be a storyline. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed learning about Africa today in the Sixth World. It's a interesting one that when I dove into it on doing the research for this, I could tell there isn't so much information, but I want to present that information because as much as I could have talked about Europe next, or South America, or plenty of other places in the world, there is more information on those parts of the world. And I can still point out some nations or places I want to have individual videos on. Asmondo and Lagos are great places to just dive into and have in-depth things where I talk about them even more. One's a city, of course, but hey, I've talked about Seattle, and I'll talk about Denver in the future. But anyway, all of you out there, I hope you enjoyed. It's diving into a corner of the Sixth World that probably is not as looked at as you want. And again, I recommend the books I talked about and the Cyber Pirate book. I should probably throw that image up. I probably should have. I didn't think to. But I can definitely do that. Yeah, Cyber Pirates. Let me get a picture of this book and throw it up over top of me. So at least you can take a look at it. It's a second edition book, as I said. There we go. So small. Larger one? Cool. There it is. Cyber Pirates source book. Definitely recommend checking that one out, too. It's, again, second edition, so it's a little outdated in a lot of stuff, but it's enough to give you some information on some of the regions there. And some of the stuff on Africa that was going on during the second edition time period. Again, we just have to kind of like take it or leave it. Sixth World Almanac, the Feral Cities book. All these give us information on what is Africa nowadays. If you like these videos, and you want to see more, and you want to see me live, I live stream this on Twitch, where I set it up and record it. So you can join me on, twitch.tv/the Dracovin Empire. Giving a follow there, great thing. If you're on YouTube, a subscription would also be great. Ring the bell, leaving a like, leaving a comment. Have you used Africa in any of your Shadowrun games? Whether or not it's something like Lagos, which we have a lot of information on, or another one of these nations or places. And, have you enjoyed checking out something like that? What kind of adventure was it? I'm interested. How did it go? That's my comment. That's the question to the comments for this day. I do more tabletop stuff every Tuesdays, Thursdays. It's Saturdays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, early afternoon. That's when I do live. Saturday mornings, late mornings. If you're looking for my general streams, I do also some gaming variety streams on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays. I have a current, as of this video, live game of Pathfinder First Edition on Wednesday evenings. Buck Your Shackled Sea. And I recommend checking out Discussing Tabletop on Saturdays. I do have a Discord, which you can link before, and a website formerly known as Twitter link. I continue to call it that. But both of those give general, like, what my schedule is, updates about what's going on, things like that, and random brain farts. Yeah, there's other great ways to support me if you want to. I've updated my Patreon, subscriptions on Twitch, all that kind of stuff. Would be loved, it's not needed, but, you know, that's other great ways to support me if you really want to. And show love for more of this content. And also, I always take suggestions for things. I think that's everything for today, you know. I've given all my shout-outs, I've given all my information, I've talked about a really interesting topic, and I hope you learned enough, and you are also interested in this region of the world. Because there's plenty of interesting regions of the world, but there's plenty of places that I feel like we just don't get enough love in the Shadowrun universe, because it is a version of our world in the future, and they need love. They really do. But anyway, until the next time, though, I bid all of you out there a wonderful farewell.